So we've been asked to write the equation of this trigonometric function. And the first thing I see is on the y-axis, this is 0 and this is -7. So we go in increments of 1, 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, and -7. And the first thing I look for is, we've got to find a few things to write a trigonometric equation. And the first thing I always ask myself is, what's the amplitude? Okay? And the amplitude is going to be the maximum minus the minimum divided by 2. Well, the maximum occurs at 0. The minimum occurs at -6. So the total height of this function is 6 units. If I divide that by 2, I get 3. So the amplitude, and I'm just going to write here on my graph, A equals 3. Okay, A equals 3. So that's the first thing I need to find. The second thing I need to find is the period. And if you look at this very carefully, there is not a complete cycle pictured. That makes this difficult, but not impossible. So what I look at is I've got a peak here at pi over 2. And I've got a valley here, which occurs at what I like to call 2.5 pi. Okay, it occurs at 2.5 pi. So I've got a peak at 1/2 pi and a valley at 2.5 pi. So the question is, how long does it take to get from here to here? The answer is subtract those two. What is 2.5 pi minus half of a pi? And the answer is 2 pi. So now from peak to peak is 1 period. From peak to valley is only half of a period. So if it takes 2 pi to complete half of a cycle, then it must take 4 pi to complete a cycle. So I write period equals 4 pi. And what do I know about the period of sine and cosine? The period of sine and cosine is always going to be equal to 2 pi over b. What would I divide 2 pi by to make it 4 pi? And the answer is 1/2. So b equals 1/2. So now I know the amplitude, and I know b, and I also know the period. So if I know the amplitude and I know b, I'm well on my way to writing the equation. Now you have 4 modifiers, a, b, c, and d. I have found a, I have found b. The next one I like to do is d, which is the vertical translation or the vertical shift. Now, normally, if you have no vertical shift and the amplitude is 3, the maximum would be at +3. The minimum would be at -3. However, my maximum is at 0. So it should be at 3 and it's moved down to 0. It's moved down 3 units. The amplitude's 3, so the minimum should be at -3, but it's at -6. It's also moved down 3 units. So the maximum has moved down 3 units. The minimum has moved down 3 units. So I can infer that all points on this graph have moved down 3 units. So my vertical translation, what I like to call D, is down 3 units. So it's down 3 units or -3. Okay. Now, I've found the amplitude, I've found the period, I've found the vertical translation. One thing I haven't done is I haven't picked which function I'm going to use. And the nice thing about sine and cosine is the function doesn't affect the amplitude, the period, or the vertical translation. It only affects the horizontal translation. So at this point I have to ask myself, do I want to use sine or cosine? Well, I try to make this as easy as possible, and so what I look for is, where is sine supposed to start? Where is cosine supposed to start? And cosine is supposed to start at the maximum. okay? And I look and I say, well, look, there's a peak. There's the maximum. Cosine is supposed to start there. So this point should be here. And it's been shifted to the right by pi over 2 units. So if I write a cosine equation, I can shift it to the right pi over 2 units, and it will be this exact graph. So I write my equation. Y equals A cosine B X and plus or minus C, which is the horizontal or phase shift, and then plus D, which will be minus 3 because it's shifted down. Now, if this has been moved to the right pi over 2, that's going to be minus pi over 2 is my horizontal shift. Had it been moved to the left, I would have added pi over 2. The nice thing about this is you can take this graph, you can plug it into any graphing calculator and see, is the peak here? Is the valley here? Does it start here? And you can check all of this, okay? So it's very nice. You can take your graphing calculator and check this. But this would be the equation that matches this graph. If you have any questions, please ask me.